Hey, this is Pastor Matt, and welcome to our Rock of Ages YouTube channel. I hope you enjoy this sermon today. Just a couple things to let you know about. This summer, we are kind of doing like church on vacation, sort of. So instead of meeting upstairs in our sanctuary where we have all of our, fancy equipment and whatnot, we're meeting downstairs because it's just a lot cooler down there and it gets hot in the summer here. And so we're meeting downstairs. You'll notice a little bit lower production value in that way, and that's just the way it is. But we're also incorporating discussion in some of our services, and so if you see the sermon suddenly skip forward and we're talking about something completely different, it's because we just had a 5-minute discussion time. So that's something to kind of be looking out for. One of these weeks we're going to be at the park doing church there and having a barbecue, so we'll see if there's a sermon upload for that one. But anyways, that's kind of how the summer is looking. We are studying the parables of Jesus, having story time with him, and so that's what we got going on for the summer. I do want to invite you, if you're in the Seattle area and if you have an opportunity to come visit us in person, that would be really great. Again, we're kind of leaning heavy into building community within our congregation and inviting people to join us from the outside and forming community with them where they're at. And if you're able to join us some Sunday, you'd be very welcome to come. And if you want to learn more about our congregation, I invite you to just follow the link in the description box below, and that'll take you to our website. Read about us, figure out who we are, what our heartbeat is, what our vision for ministry is, and if it's something that you are fired up about, if something that you would like to join us in, I invite you to support us in that. Be praying for us. There's a link to be able to give online if you want to support the work that's going on here. But I invite you to consider how God could be inviting you to join us as we are following him in his mission. So with that, I hope you enjoy the sermon this Sunday. Bye-bye.
Good morning, church.
Good morning.
It's so good to see you all, and this is going to be my last Sunday, so I'm glad that I'm here today. Mm-hmm. So today we'll be reading through another parable from Matthew 13, verses 44 through 46. The parable of the hidden treasure and the pearl. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all that he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and brought it.
Okay. So I'm going to adjust this real quick so I can actually see in case I get off track here. As we get started, I want you to think of what it would be like to be one of those people that is on the Antique Roadshow. Who's seen Antique Roadshow? Okay, so if you haven't, it is basically the show where you have people who show up and they have some sort of trinket that they have. Maybe it's a family heirloom or something, it's a painting, something like that, and they are hoping it's really valuable, but they aren't sure, and so they go to an expert, an Antique Roadshow. They actually have one coming to Seattle this year, I believe, and but they go there and they find out, oh, actually that's just trash. It's not valuable at all. Or sometimes I saw one where this woman had a painting appraised for $200, and the person said, well, actually, plot twist, it's worth $200,000.
And she said, wow.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, so I guess I'm not keeping this painting. And so there's a bunch of things like that. Now, I was looking for this picture, and I'm just going to show you something that you should go on the internet and look this up. Fake captions for Antique Roadshow. There's a bunch of these things. This is just my gift to you. Go on the internet, find all these pictures of fake items on there. But anyways, this idea of a trinket that you have that you aren't sure if it's that valuable, but then someone else comes along and says, oh, actually, that is of way more value than you have any idea. That idea is kind of what is being talked about in these two parables that Jesus shares today. You have someone who doesn't know what they have until someone comes along and takes it off their hands. And Jesus tells these two parables like this. Thank you for reading. We're going to read it again here. He says, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure that's hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. And then in his joy, he goes and he sells all that he has and he buys that field. And again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl of great value went and sold all that he had and bought it. Joke for you. What did the shell, the clam, say to the pearl when it was getting too big? You got to get out of here. You are expanding my shelter. Computer came up with that. Bashed the computer. Anyways, so this first parable, it seems like this man in the parable he's digging in this field because the owner of the field wants him to do so. And we don't know why he's digging in the field, but apparently this landowner doesn't know that that field contains this treasure. Otherwise, why would he have some worker digging it up? And this is probably happening, what this treasure's in this field and the guy doesn't know that the treasure's there. It's probably happening because back in those days, we did not have FDIC insurance. We did not have that. You couldn't put money in a bank and absolutely know that it would stay there. And so sometimes people would bury their treasure in their field to protect it from marauders and thieves. But if that person dies without digging it up and giving it to someone else, that treasure remains. And so that's why the treasure's probably there and the owner of the field doesn't know it. And maybe you're wondering, like, why didn't the laborer just dig it up and take it home with him right off the bat? Well, some commentators, they note that the laws at the time dictated that if you were a worker for someone, everything that you were doing then belonged to that person's, like proprietary information. If this worker dug up the treasure and lifted it out of the field, well, then that belongs to the person who owns the field. But if the guy says, no, I'm not going to do any work for him. I'm just going to recover that hole and be a bad worker in that way. And I'm going to go buy this field. Then he is perfectly just in doing so. And so that's why he's doing what he does in the parable. Likewise, in the second parable, the merchant who finds this one particular pearl, and he's willing to give up everything that he has in order to get it, just like in the previous case, the owner of this current pearl doesn't know what he's got. He knows that it's valuable, but he doesn't know it's that valuable. But this treasure hunter does. This merchant who's looking for this pearl does know, and he takes advantage of the original owner's mistake. And the difference between the two parables is that the one guy isn't looking for treasure, but he ends up finding it. Whereas the other guy is looking for it. He's actively looking for pearls. He's searching for them. And he finds one just where he's looking for it. But in both, other than that difference, both parables are describing the same situation. You have an owner who has something, but he doesn't know what he really has. And then you have someone who finds it and treasures it, cherishes it for what it really is. That's the essential, basic story of both parables. And the surface level point of both parables is the same. We ought to be like the people who gave up everything for the treasure and for the pearls. We ought to be willing to give up everything for the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because regardless of what whoever has it thinks, it is more valuable than anything in this world. It is more valuable to be in the presence of God than anything else. The problem, of course, and the reason why Jesus is telling us these parables in the first place, is that we might often find ourselves to be more like the original owners of the field and the pearl than the digger and the merchant. If we take an honest look at our hearts, we might find that we don't always live as though the kingdom of heaven is worth giving everything up for. And the reason why is because we just don't truly know the richness that we have in it. I think that's the basic thing that's happening here. And just by the way, you don't want to take parables too far. You don't want to make them say things that they're not, and not every detail matters in a parable, but if we can just play with this a little bit, I think we can actually see in the parable a couple of ways that we might devalue, or reasons why we might devalue the kingdom of heaven. And in the case of the treasure in the field, the owner of it apparently hadn't done a good enough job digging around in his field. He didn't discover what he had. He didn't dig all the way around there. He just sees the surface value of the field. But because he hasn't taken the value to dig all the way through his field, he doesn't know. And as you hear me say that, you're probably thinking, well, who would do that? Who would actually take the time to dig through every inch of his field looking for treasure? No one would. So you can't really fault the guy for not digging around, but that's kind of what is happening here. Because he didn't, he has missed out on a fortune. And I think this relates to the kingdom of God like this. We may not understand the true value of the kingdom of heaven because we just haven't really taken the time to discover the treasures that are in it. There's an absolute wealth of resources available to us to be discovered in the Word and to be discovered in Christian teaching throughout the centuries. Millions of people have put a ton of work into trying to understand the greatest mysteries of life within the Christian context, but we just don't have access to it unless we go digging for it. And this is why we emphasize as a church a proactive, regular time of reading in God's Word. Intentional times of studying God's Word in Christian community, and even classes. I'm going through, just went through a class with Emma. There's other opportunities to go through LBDI courses in different Bible classes and how to study the Bible and evangelism and elder training and all these things. We do have, and Paul's going to seminary, I went through seminary. There's value to be had in taking classes and in learning cohorts, in joining Christian community. And the reason why is because we don't know what we really have in the Christian faith until we actually go digging into it a little bit. We take the time, and maybe some of the digging we don't get a lot out of, but every once in a while we come across some buried treasure that just absolutely changes our lives. But we don't know it until we actually take the time to do that. That's the first reason why we might not really value all that the kingdom of heaven has to offer. We just haven't dug into it enough. The second is related to it, and like in the case of the landowner, we can't really get after the original owner of the pearl for not really understanding the true value of what he had. If who has baseball cards? Who's collect baseball cards? You collect them? Paul, do you know how much they're worth by chance?
Nope.
No? Did anyone else have any other collections at all? Like stamps or anything like that? Coins? Okay.
I get baseball cards too.
You got baseball cards too? Have you gone through the process of having them appraised and whatnot?
A long time ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they are now.
Yeah, so, all right, so I'll go to David's house and rob his baseball cards from him. No, it's actually really, really tough to get them appraised rightly, because you might go to a card shop and they say oh yeah, that's worth $100, and actually it's worth $1,000, and they just want to buy it off your hands so that they can make that money. It's kind of hard. You have to go to someone who can actually appraise it without having a dog in the fight, right? It's a tough thing to do. And pearls in particular are kind of hard to know just how valuable they are. Let's see, did I? No, I didn't have that one in there. It's some pearls, they are valued at millions of dollars today. There's one that was recently sold for $32 million. And it's absolutely redonkulous.
You had it on.
Oh, I did?
Yeah.
In the
Was-
first part where it was going through the pictures.
Oh, I did. Okay. Yeah. So there we go. Unless you are an expert in that particular thing, sometimes you just don't know what you have. And it's hard to know. And that's kind of what is going on here. And I think that relates to the kingdom of heaven and our valuing of it like this. We might not understand the kingdom of heaven's value at times because we don't have the expertise to see it. And I don't mean that you have to be a pastor to see it. What I mean by that is that it's not often until we go through the crises in our families that we have questions that drive us to become experts in what Christian truth has to say about families. Until we're faced with a moral dilemma that we then say, oh man, I wonder what Scripture actually says about that. And then you find out just what Christian truth has to offer you. It's not until you're faced with your mortality that you begin to question that much more. And I'm reminded of one of my heroes, Tim Keller, as I think about this. As many of you know, he died a couple months ago from pancreatic cancer. It's actually his second go-around with cancer. His first go-around, he had a similar experience to what I'm going to tell you about here. But the second one, it was significantly harder. When he first got the diagnosis that he was absolutely was going to die from pancreatic cancer, he didn't believe it. He was in a state of denial. And actually, when he got that diagnosis, he was in the midst of writing his book called Hope in the Times of Fear, which is primarily about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so he is writing this book about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is the answer to death. He gets the news, you're going to die. And it's going to be months or years. It's not going to be decades. You're going to die. And he's like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. He was in the state of denial and he needed time to accept it. And he later did, but he said this, a few quotes from him, some interviews. He said, this is what was happening in me. Basically, we all function as if we are going to live forever. We're in a deep, deep denial about it. And the only way you know that is when you finally actually do get the kind of diagnosis that you may die within months or weeks, that I did. And you suddenly realize, I didn't really believe I was going to die. I really didn't. So here I am writing a book about the resurrection, and I realized I only half believed I was going to die. I went back and realized that in some ways I also only half believed in the resurrection. Not intellectually so much, but all the way down deep in my heart. I realized I needed to have a deeper faith in the resurrection, both intellectually and mentally. And then as he continued in his work of writing his book, that faith in the resurrection of Jesus Christ became much, much deeper. It became something that he took hold of fully, and it sank deeper into his heart to the point that he later could confidently say, I do know that the resurrection of Jesus Christ really happened. I've done this research. It satisfies my mind and my heart. And when I die, I will know that resurrection too. I will experience that resurrection. And this is a guy who, he's the most prolific apologist of the last 50 years in Christendom. He, at least on the lay level, but his work expands really far. He's written a lot about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He's taught extensively about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, but it's not until life forced him to really kind of, do I believe this for myself? It's not until then that his truly expert level insights came to fruition. That's what I mean when I say that sometimes we don't value the kingdom of heaven because we're not experts in it. It's not until God kind of forces us to go through situations that we then find just how valuable it is. That's often what happens. That is the absolute biggest treasure, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's the biggest treasure of Christian truth that we have. And it's the one that we all need to become experts in. But Christianity, it's filled with treasures that we glance over simply because life hasn't given us the reason to investigate its value. And if we don't understand their value, we might let them slip out of our grasp. And that's what we don't want to do. Okay. All right, so we're going to change course quite a bit here, okay? So far, we have just been talking about how we can avoid being like the original owners of the field and the pearl and be more like the people who found the treasure and who found the pearl. The discussion block will be like maybe 5 minutes from now, 10 minutes from now. So you need to be comfortable. You just do that. But there is, if you watch the midweek text video that I put out on Wednesday, and by the way, if you want to be on the list to get that, just let me know and I'll get you on the email list. Just give me your email and you can be there, or you just subscribe to YouTube and it comes up. But I'm recording kind of a mini sermon, 10-minute sort of thing each Wednesday and putting that out. Something I mentioned in there is that there's another way that we can see this parable. The surface level one is what we've just talked about. But as is very common in Jesus's parables, there's often a double entendre, a double meaning, a double hearing. So there's the real way to say it. Just throw that one in there, double entendre. And the reason why is because of the context. If you just kind of think back to chapter 13, we're in this series of parables of Jesus, and we've just covered Matthew 13 so far. But in the two parables of men who sow seed into a field, that Jesus says, who is the man who sows the good seed in the field? It's representing Jesus. It's God who's doing it. In the parable of the mustard seed, who is sowing that seed? It's Jesus, and the seed it's the kingdom of God, and it's doing this massive work. In the parable of the woman who mixes leaven into a whole batch of dough, causing it to be leavened bread, who is the woman in the parable? It's God. It's Jesus doing that work. And in the parable that follows this one, which we're actually skipping because we have to skip some, there are angels who gather all the righteous and the unrighteous for the judgment, but it's pictured as this net that's cast into the sea to gather all the fish, and then they're going to sort them out later. Who's responsible for all the action there? It's God, right? He is the one who is causing his angels to do that work. And in all of these parables, they all incorporate or start with the phrase, the kingdom of heaven is like, and the answer to who is responsible for this work in all of these is God. And so the question is, well, why on earth would these two parables be any different? Why are they just about how we obey God and how we value God? And the answer is that they don't have to be. And I think there is the basic sense that's going on in the parable, and that is definitely a law message, but there's also this gospel message that God is the one who is finding this treasure. And the question is, what is the treasure that he is finding? This law message we've talked about so far is you really need to value the kingdom of heaven. You need to treat it for what it truly is, rather than treating it on the same level of everything else in life. That is a law message, and it is a message that we need to hear because it's right. There is nothing more valuable than the kingdom of heaven. But the gospel message of the kingdom of heaven is willing to do whatever it takes to have you, the treasure that's buried in the field, the pearl that the world doesn't know its value. That message that the kingdom of heaven is willing to search high and low for you, The kingdom of heaven is willing to dig all through the field for you. And when he finds you, he will sell everything that he has to sell to buy you. That is the gospel message in a nutshell. You are a treasure to him. You are valuable to him. And in Jesus, like that's, if we see that as kind of a gospel message describing God's activity for us, you look for the gospel accounts to kind of line up with that. And that is what we see in Jesus. He comes to earth. He is God. He becomes incarnate. He leaves, he lets go of the privilege of all his exercise of divinity. He forsakes his riches and becomes poor for us. He becomes a little baby. He becomes all of these weak, small things. Why? Because he has a treasure on the earth that he desperately wants to buy. He wants to buy it with his blood. He lays aside his immortality. He faces a mortal death. He is shamed and dishonored so that he can buy you. Cost him everything. And as the author of Hebrews reminds us, he did it with great joy, like that first person in the parable. He sells everything with great joy, knowing what it would get him. He looks at the shame of the cross and he says, whatever. Who cares? That is nothing compared to the treasure that I have in humanity in redeeming them. He saw the cost, which was great, but when he saw what it would get him, he's like, it's a no-brainer. I'll gladly go to the cross in great joy and sell all that I have to give. Now, that's the interpretation, but what does that do for us? What does it do for us? How does it change our lives? There's at least two things. And the first is that it basically, it shows us how valuable we truly are. The Bible, it says a lot about how we don't measure up to God's standard for us, how we've messed up, how even all of our righteous deeds are as filthy rags. Like even the best of intentions that we have, they fail to line up with what God has designed us to be. It says a lot about that, and our lives give a lot of evidence of it. The world's a mess. And you can see why maybe some people would think, man, shouldn't God just have a little redo here? Start over with humanity because things are messed up and it's not working out too well. There's a reason why there is a growing number, and this is absolutely bonkers to me. These people are wrong, but there's a reason why there's a growing number of people who believe that it would be a good thing for humanity to just cease to exist as it currently is one day. There's a couple of different, very prominent groups in society right now who are pushing for humanity to be fundamentally changed or just done away with because we are essentially a poison on the earth, destroying the environment and so on and so forth. There's a reason why those people have that belief. They're wrong, but there's a reason why they have it. We've made a royal mess of God's good earth, and we can kind of get why God might want to just do away with us, recreate something new. Can get that, but when Jesus gave up his priceless life, something that we cannot value, the value of God himself, when he gave up his priceless life to redeem us, he showed us just how priceless we are to God, that we actually are valuable. He doesn't want to just cast us aside. He values us, and he is going to do whatever it takes to get us. Jesus dying on the cross, selling all that he owns, his own life, to buy us, it shows us that none of us are lost causes, that none of us are more trouble than we're worth. All of us hold inestimable value to him, and because of that, he's not willing to let us go. He values us, he wants us, and Jesus shows us that by paying the price that he did for us. And so what does this do for us? It lets you have confidence that you shouldn't let anyone, including yourself, tell you that you're not valuable. Don't let anyone tell you that. God values you. And you can trust his valuation of you. He's not like that person I mentioned who valued that one painting for $200. He is the expert who knows what he's talking about. You are of inestimable value to him. So don't let anyone tell you that you're not valuable. Don't let anyone tell you, even yourself, think that your life is worthless, because it's not. So that's the first thing it does. This is the second thing. So first, it shows us our value. The second one is it shows us the true value of the kingdom of heaven. It shows us the value of God. Because God has shown us his heart for us in Jesus, we can see that he really is someone who is worthy of our worship. He isn't just all powerful, he's good. He's worthy of giving everything up for. It's like when you meet someone you really appreciate, you want to be with them. And when we get to know God's heart and just how good he is, it makes us want to be with him all the more. That we would be in the presence of someone who values us that much. It's sort of like this, although to a much greater scale. Hey, Paul, do you know where this is from?
Katsu Burger, wherever we went?
No. By the way, Katsu Burger, you got to go. You can get the Godzilla Burger. Wonderful. No, this is a place out in Greenwood here.
Oh, Window?
Wingdome. Yeah. So imagine one day you see that there on Facebook you see that there's an 80% off dinner special at Wingdome or where some local restaurant that is going to cost you maybe like $40 for 2 meals, okay? Something like that. Suppose you see that and it piques your interest. Now, I guess Julie and I are the only ones with little kids right now, so this only works for us, but imagine you are me and Julia, and you have 3 little kids that you gotta figure out babysitting for, and you have to make food for, and you gotta work with the babysitter on like the whole bedtime routine and all of the things like that. That 80% off of a $30, $40 bill actually isn't that much of an incentive for us to go out. Like it is, but it's not. Because all of those things that we got to organize are just kind of a bummer deal. But if, however, that was not for Wingdome, but it was for an exclusive 7-course tasting menu sort of thing prepared by a world-class chef who just so happens to have an opening that night, that 80% off is a heck of an incentive. That is saving us a ton of money, and it's for a once-in-a-lifetime experience that we're barely paying for, right? Anyways. Of course we're going to go through the pain of getting a babysitter, of getting dressed up, and doing all of the things that it takes to go there. Of course, that's going to be a good incentive. And that's sort of like, although it's to, again, a way lesser extent, it's sort of like what Jesus showing his heart does for us. When we see just how good of the offer that he has given us is, just how much he loves us, just how much of a treasure he is, when he invites us to follow him and to live in relationship with him, it causes us to be willing to give up all that we have to follow him. It causes us to value the kingdom of heaven the way that the treasure finders in our parables valued their treasures. And that's my prayer for us, that we would continually see the value of the kingdom of heaven because we see Jesus. And as we do that, that we would treat it for what it really is.